listening to either daytime or late night TV, or dozing off into odd dreams. It was about a week later when I first noticed it. I didn't have a whole lot of feeling back in my hand yet, as the nerves had taken a hell of a beating and was still mostly numb. However, it's kind of hard not to notice when your fingers decide to start twitching on their own. And I'm not talking the odd muscle spasm or cramp we all get from time to time. I'm talking full-blown clenching and unclenching and moving side to side. The strangest part was I couldn't feel it at all. It didn't register in my brain that it was moving. It was like the hand belonged to someone else. This continued for a couple of minutes before subsiding. Over the next couple of days, it seemed to spread through the rest of my fingers, though all but my index and thumb were immobilized by the cast. Still, I could feel them talking against the cast for a couple of moments, some dull pain in my hand, and then the movement would subside. I decided to chalk it up to the interaction of the painkillers I'd been taking and various psychiatric drugs I had been on for years. It didn't seem to be a problem, and honestly, it was kind of cool. Very dissociative and trippy. It was about 10 days after it started that I woke up in the middle of the night to an intense stabbing pain in my forearm. I fumbled for the light stand next to my bed, panicked, and when I flipped it on, it was several seconds before I regained composure, enough to start trying to figure out what had happened. The first thing I noticed was a small trickle of blood from the bottom of the cast. Several other bloody spots had started to form on the cast, all in line down my arm from hand. When I looked back to the bed, I saw several spots of blood about where my arm had been resting, along with something else. It was very small, and I had to pick it up and bring it over to the light to get a better look. When I finally realized what it was, I was so startled. I dropped it, and it hit the nightstand and rolled off the surface, and behind the headboard, bloody screw, similar to the one the doctors had shown me after my surgery to explain what they'd done to set my bones. I was back at the hospital ER the next morning. It turns out a bloody cast will get you pretty high up on the priority chart, and I was seen almost immediately. Doctors examined the bloody spots and listened to my story, but their skeptical looks told me I wasn't getting the benefit of the doubt here. Finally, after some hemming and hawing, they ended up cutting the cast off to examine the arm closer. When they did, it was revealed that I had a long, thin scratch from the base of my wrist down to where the cast ended. That gave them pause, but they said something about not taking proper care and letting something get into the cast. My story about the bloody bone screw was chalked up to a vivid dream, brought on by the painkillers. They did seem a bit startled by the odd bruise in my palm, but in the end they simply reapplied the cast and sent me back home, this time with a bottle of Tylenol. The next week and a half saw the weirdness of the whole situation increase. My hand was twitching almost hourly now, and the free thumb and index finger would sometimes pinch me as if possessed of a mind of their own. That's when I decided to get a second opinion from the Hypochondriac's Handbook, the internet. It didn't take long before I managed to track down my symptoms to a very specific condition, that of alien hand syndrome. The extremely rare condition usually follows some sort of brain trauma and is characterized by a complete disassociation from the activities of the given limb. These activities include various rude gestures, violent acts, or other inappropriate motions. The condition is sometimes thought to be brought about by a suppressed personality taking control of the limb. Needless to say, this scared me shitless, especially when I found that there was no known treatment for the condition. At the same time, more weirdness ensued while I slept. Every other morning or so, I'd awaken to feel something jabbing me in the thigh, and reach down to find another bloody bone screw. However, the trail of blood would now lead back to the open end of the cast, just past my finger, and there was no visible blood beyond a few drops on the cast. I still hadn't regained much feeling in the hand or forearm, and was now starting to seriously wonder about what was going on. A return trip to the hospital didn't help at all, as I was told that I was being unrealistic. Alien hand syndrome, they said, was extremely unlikely with the type of brain injury I'd sustained. They were, however, concerned with the new x-rays of my hand, which showed that the bones were not healing quickly, and they began discussing the possible need for a secondary surgery to reset them. I didn't even bother showing them the bag of bloody screws, now number a dozen, that I'd brought with me. I'm sure they'd have rationalised that away as well, despite the odd bruising on my hand when they replaced the cast yet again. The next couple of weeks are when things started getting downright terrifying. More screws showed up in my bed, along with 2 bloody metal plates pushed out the bottom of the cast, always while I was sleeping, until I was pretty sure that every piece of metal that had been put into my arm had been accounted for, and that's when spasms started to get really bad. There wasn't any pain, as I'd lost the feeling in my arm, but it was still noticeable. It seemed like the arm would pulse along its entire length, and sometimes could hear faint organic squishing noises coming from inside the cast. This coincided with the hand itself really starting to act up. It seemed to have gained control of my arm up to the elbow, and it would now raise itself up and knock things off my desk, jam itself against the door to stop me from opening it, or even scratch gouges in my thigh. I eventually resorted to using homemade splint of duct tape and lengths of pipe to immobilise the arm. I'd cover the hand in several layers of socks to keep the exposed fingers from being able to find and bite flesh between its nails. Oh, I'd forgotten about the nails. The nails on the exposed hand, they always seemed to be long. I'd tried trimming them for a while, but they'd always grow back the next morning. When the fingers started to seriously avoid the clippers, I just gave up. That had been the initial logic behind the socks, but it was also what some people may refer to guy logic. Out of sight, out of mind, comes close to the logic, but there was also an element of blind hope that it would miraculously solve itself. I couldn't maintain a normal sleep schedule anymore, thanks to the odd noises and spasms coming from my arm. I would often awaken from passing out somewhere in the house to feel the hand straining against its bonds. What was more worrying was that it seemed to be getting stronger, while the weird noises and movements had gotten worse. I wasn't able to see the doctor anymore. It was partly fear of what they might find, and partly fear of what might happen if that arm somehow managed to get loose when I was driving a car. So I simply waited for the other shoe to drop. That all culminated in what happened last night. Well, this morning technically. I awoke in the middle of the night to an odd series of stimuli, the sound of scratching fingernails and peeling tape, the feeling of my arm being torqued by something. I didn't want to turn on the light, but I did. I'm not sure why. I think I already knew generally what I would see. The sock taped to the end of the cast was still there, except there was now a hole through them. Extending through the hole was a single finger. Well, it had once been a finger. My finger, what it was now, I don't think there is a word for. It looked like a normal finger, with a neatly trimmed nail, a healthy skin colour, unswollen and unblemished, except for some short hairs on each phalanx between the joints, all 24 or so. It was now easily over 1.5 feet long, and was articulated like no hand on earth ever had been. It had bent backwards over the hand, forming a nauseating loop of flesh, and was scratching at the edges of the tape with that neatly trimmed fingernail, trying to peel it loose. It kept at this for maybe 15 seconds as I watched, before it suddenly stopped, and the tip of the finger slowly rose from its efforts at freeing itself and pointed at my eyes. No, that's not right. That may have been what it might have looked like, objectively, but I knew that it wasn't pointing at my eyes. It was looking me in the eyes. This hideous tendril-like appendage was looking me in the eyes. The next few minutes were a blur. I can only recount snippets. The muscles of my forearm straining against the immobilizing bonds. Me stumbling to my feet, screaming in stark naked terror. The feeling of something else wriggling in the socks over my fingers. The sound of fabric beginning to tear. Me lurching across the room, stumbling and falling to the floor. The sight of rapid movement through the growing hole in the sock. My fingers on my remaining arm, feeling something solid and heavy under their grasp. Another frenzied series of movements, and when time slowed down again, I was slumped on the floor, a heavy weight in my left hand, a screaming pain in my right. I looked down to find a heavy-duty mag light I kept by the side of my bed for nighttime emergencies, clutched in hand. Glancing right, I saw what I'd done. My elbow was bent at an odd angle, a series of heavy circular bruises visible where I'd used the butt of the flashlight to shatter it. The sock at the end of my arm was slightly bloody, and I could feel a twitching mass inside. The one finger that had worked its way out of the sock was writhing on the floor, several joints broken. I'd beaten my fingers to a pulp with the flashlight, but they still had life in them. I sat for a moment while I regained my wits. I ended up downing a couple of the remaining strong painkillers I had left, and by the time they'd kicked in, I discovered that the tentacle finger had managed to pull itself back into the sock. Even then, I could still hear the viscous, wet noises coming from inside the cast, and could hear the finger popping as they set the joints I dislodged. They're still at it. I've already had to whack them a couple of times with a hammer I grabbed from my toolbox while I've been dictating this. I also took a couple of swings at the elbow, just to be on the safe side. My arm probably would hurt like hell, but I don't think I can really call it my arm anymore. See, I think I know what happened. The doctors were right and wrong when they told me my type of injury was not correlated with alien hand syndrome. What they hadn't taken into account was that it might not have been the injury that caused the problem, but the treatment. You see, what they do when you have a severe subdural hematoma and time is in short supply is basically cut a hole in your head to let the blood out. This is similar to the ancient practice of trepanation, a process that was often used by primitive medicine to let evil spirits out of the person. However, this technique was only widely used way before any form of modern medicine or science, because we know better now. Well, maybe we do. The thing currently repurposing one of my extremities begs to differ. But, back on topic, since this occurred before our understanding of modern medicine, the patients would often die from a variety of causes before recovering, so there was never any extensive data on the effects of the process. So, for all we know, it may have let the demons out. The problem is that no one ever did tests to make sure this was a one-way street. Maybe when they opened my skull to save my life, they accidentally let something into me, something with malevolent intent that doesn't follow the laws of reality as we know them. And when they operated on my arm afterwards, the metal screws and plates, combined with loose blood, served as an impromptu ritual to bind it to that part of my body for the time being, so it had to work its way loose from there. It tore its way free and started repurposing what flesh it could get at to serve its new purpose. I'm not sure, these are only guesses, but I don't think it matters anymore. It doesn't really matter if it's demons, aliens, or whatever. I just want this to end. I'm filled with a strange sense of calm now. I have a plan, and I'm going to execute it. I know that whatever is in my arm, it has to be stopped. But I also don't want to die. I'm not sure offing myself would even help. I don't think that the thing in my arm really needs me, judging by its behaviour towards the rest of my body. So suicide or amputation are out. But I've hatched a plan. When I started telling this story, it was really just to kill time. When I do this in order to survive, I need to make sure I'm somewhere people will see me and call for help right away. And that's what helped me arrive at the course of action I'm about to undertake. See, the county is doing some long overdue maintenance on the trees along my street. I can already hear them going at it a couple of doors down with chainsaws. Those saws ain't what interests me though. What interests me though is another piece of equipment they brought with them that I can hear running. A large industrial grade wood chipper. If I'm lucky, I'll be able to tear myself free after it gets to my elbow. And if not, well, I won't ever have to remember what I've been through. Banshees cry. I felt the presence of the woman in white before I heard her call. My body suddenly plagued by shudders and a sense of dark foreboding. The fear, the lament and the pain ached through my ragged body, telling me she will be soon with us, to sing to us the song of the damned. Short, shallow breaths escaped my broken lungs as I felt her move closer to the ramshackle hut I call home. Suddenly, she let loose her screeching wail, sending me to the floor in a heap, sobbing and soaked in my own fear-induced urine. I now knew what my role was. My fate was sealed by the call of the banshee, the cry of the woman in white. I shakily brought myself to my feet and slowly made my way to the door. My hand reached out and grasped the rusted metal handle. The door swung open, rusted hinges creaking, and for the first time in my bleak life, I saw the banshee, the summoner of my kind to their demise or fortune. The woman's dress was so white, so pristine, it illuminated the perpetual night of the Black King's land. As my decrepit eyes ran over her, I was taken aback by her unyielding beauty. The white dress hung loose and translucent, showing her womanly curves and taut breasts. If my body wasn't so corrupted and diseased, I would feel a masculine hunger, but all that ran through me was a sense of longing for a touch of humanity again. Her wailing song stopped abruptly as I made my way to her. Her glowing white eyes stared at me as I kneeled before her otherworldly presence. Her disgust was palpable as she took in the sight of my wretched figure, and I counted myself lucky that I have not seen a mirror in thousands of years. I realised I'd been staring and cast my eyes down to the ground to not upset the one piece of beauty left in a world destroyed. But as I did, I felt her touch my broken body. The pains and aches of thousands of years of torment suddenly dissipated, while I felt my bones rebuild themselves and my ruptured organs mend. I heard a soft, melodious voice whisper in my head, "Arise." Hearing her speak to me sent a warmth through my body, a warmth that my people haven't felt in eons. I arose quick to my feet, but kept my eyes down on the ground, still wanting to respect my saviour. "You are the true chosen of the Black King," her beautiful voice whispered through my soul. "So many have failed, but you are the one who will bring us back to the light." My heart leapt with joy. I was the true chosen. All the pain and torture were quickly forgotten, for I was to be the one who lit the darkness aflame and give the Black King back his empire. The glory itself would be enough for me, but I would be rewarded with riches and land, and maybe even my manhood again. I boldly looked into the empty eyes of the banshee. If I was the chosen knight, why could I not? As I raised my eyes to hers, a smile appeared on her bright red lips that contrasted beautifully to her pale, radiant skin. She leaned close to me, and I felt the heat emanating off her lips as she pressed them against my mouth. It was as if she lit my body ablaze. Another first in ages. I felt passion burn through my body, and any fear I had for my coming trials subsided completely. I knew right then and there I would do anything to feel this every day. No man or beast would stop me from taking back the light. I will do the king's bidding, my lady. My voice crackled and broke over the words, the first of which I have spoken in many sunless days. Her smile seemed to grow brighter as she pointed in a direction behind me. Go, don the armour, find the gate, defeat the taker of light, bring us out of the darkness. With that, the banshee disappeared back into the void where she resides. The taker of light. Was it someone or something that took the light from our world? How? Why would something exist so cruel as to send millions into inflexible darkness? Whoever or whatever it is, I swear to defeat. I will be the king's chosen knight and bring light and warmth back to my home. If not for me, then for the beauty of the banshee. Newly determined, and the thoughts of the lady's soft caress to keep me warm, I set forth for my destiny. The path before me was a treacherous cobblestone road that weaved through the burnt forest and ended at the abandoned capital. As I took my first steps, the sense of confidence I had while in the banshee's presence slightly subsided. The darkness is something I am accustomed to, but the eternal blackness that surrounded my hovel sent chills down my spine and filled my soul with a palpable dread. I took a deep breath, feeling air fill my lungs, almost not noticing the lack of rattle in them, and moved forward at a slow pace. I knew the direction I must go. The pilgrimage that I am embarking on is not one we are told of, but one that runs through our blood. The message is clear. Once a night falls, the banshee will find the next, until the chosen knight reigns victorious and brings back the light. In all my years as a subject of the king, I've heard the banshee scream thousands of times, always in groups of two. The first signifies a fellow knight has fallen. How, I do not know. The second is outside the hut of the next knight in line.